Just in time for the dogs to go crazy. Okay. I know I promised more of my personal story today, but actually, it's actually a little going to be, I'm going to be saying exactly what I feel when I do that. And so, last week, I started reading the next Go Show lecture, the lecture that we're going to be covering today, which is basically Stand Up with Courage. And this is the one where he takes two parts of the opening of the eyes and discusses them. And the spirit that this is written with totally matched where I'm going to be coming from when I do that. So I'm flipping. Rather than doing this, next time I'm going to tell my understanding and where I come from. Basically, I'm going to go back right over this again, okay? Because there's no conflict with what I've experienced and what's expressed here. You know, I just had different mentors than President Ikeda, okay? But mentors in this Buddhism are all equal. Frankly, if they're correct teachers, a correct teacher is a correct teacher is a correct teacher. Okay, anybody that can lead you to the Gohonzon in a manner that allows you to manifest your Buddha nature and attain Buddhahood in this lifetime, you're fortunate. We all have different karmas. I mean, you know, like I was just saying to what's your name? George. I was just saying to George, you know, you got to consider the reality that President Ikeda, you know, when you hear him talking, he was with President Toda from the time he was 19 years old, all the way up until President Toda died, okay? And then he took over as the president of the Soka Gakkai 3 years later. So the reality is that, you know, he's not really practiced in the kind of environment that we all have to. If you understand what I'm saying, I'm not diminishing that. I'm saying that's great, good fortune, but we all have different karma. Yes. We don't all get to have, you know, Josei Toda as our mentor, okay? But we can make Josei Toda our mentor. He certainly was for me. And that's why when I started out, I really looked at the Gohonzon as my mentor, because Mr. Matsuoka essentially taught me that the Gohonzon and Nichiren are inseparable. That is the life of the eternal Buddha. Okay, so I didn't really have, our whole organization in the United States was geared towards George M. Williams, who ended up being somebody that President Ikeda didn't feel he could trust ultimately. And there was a big switch out and there was a big fallout because some people were very disillusioned about what the heck, we've been following, you know, Mr. Williams, and now this has changed, and then now everybody, you know, Daisaku Ikeda wants to be the center of everything. And that's really not the way it was in actuality. The fact is that people were beginning to practice incorrectly as it relates to the correct teaching. It was not being instilled, and then it wasn't being instilled in a fashion that was being propagated widely. Okay, because this is deep stuff, all right? And there are not a lot of people that are capable because they haven't exerted the effort to master the Gosho, okay? President Toda, President Makaguchi, President Ikeda, all have the Gosho mastered, okay? They are correct teachers, okay? That's why we honor and emulate them to the best of our degree as the three founding presidents. But he's going to talk about President Makaguchi here. When President Makaguchi actually went into prison for the sake of his faith, there are only a few thousand members in total in the Soka Gakkai in the whole world. Okay, and it wasn't even called Soka Gakkai; it was Soka Kyoiku Gakkai, right? Yeah. So everything has kind of changed as the age changes, and it's not a different age. We're still in the latter day of the law, but times change, and environments change, and world circumstances change. For instance, how long ago did President Ikeda give this lecture? Does anybody have any idea? It's like from 2012, finished in 2015. All right? The world was a different place 10 years ago. You know, There were a lot of people that thought that China was headed towards a democratic kind of a vibe rather than an authoritative kind of thing where religion's controlled and all that sort of deal like it is today. The same thing with Russia. President Ikeda spent a lot of time trying to open the door for Kosen Rufu in places that the West would have said, why are you even there? They're atheist kinds of structures. They don't, what good is that? President Ikeda is going to say, because there are people there. I mean, like I said last week, everybody is a bodhisattva of the earth. Everybody's a human being. When I tell my story, I'll explain why I'm so anti-racist. That's from the time I was a little boy, I couldn't handle people that just made distinctions among other human beings because of their race. I thought I was raised actually by my Christian mother, that was not the way to perceive life correctly. So, I'll get into all that after I read this, but this is too important to put in segments. And so let's get this Go Show done, and then I'll reflect my experience, because the whole point for me is again, President Ikeda started with President Toda, became the president of the Soka Gakkai. I didn't have that good fortune, but I did have the good fortune to have mentors that did understand the level of my faith. I had a lot of people that didn't understand my faith. But the ones that did had full confidence in where I would end up by the time I was done. Okay? They actually kind of told me, Tom, you're gonna lead a lot of people and clarify a lot of things. And so, that just sounded like happy talk at the time. But here we are, and these videos, thanks to you guys, are continuing. And I think that it's important that we kind of stand up, because Kosen Rufu is not an assured thing unless the people that are practicing this Buddhism correctly propagate that correct understanding and fulfill their missions. We can't count on other people to create Kosen Rufu. We have to take the responsibility to do that. Yeah. Okay? So that's what President Ikeda is going to talk about in this whole thing. And my whole thing is going to be the reality that people still don't understand the Go Show. We talk all the time about the Go Show, but I don't see anybody else reading the whole Go Show, really understanding the Go Show. You've got to read it several times over the course of your lifetime to get to the deepest understanding. I mean, that's been my experience anyhow. So let's start with Stand Up with Courage is the title of this chapter. It's chapter 6. We're more than halfway through now. There's only 11 segments of this. Teachings for Victory, Volume 7. It's on page 81. And there's no real background to go over. I will go over one thing because it's going to be mentioned here, and it's mentioned from the orally transmitted teachings and whatever, and that's about Bodhisattva Universal Worthy. Does anybody know, does that ring a bell? Do you understand? What's Bodhisattva Universal Worthy significant for? The Universal Worthy Sutra, which is the last sutra in the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra, okay? And encouragements of Bodhisattva Universal Worthy chapter, all right, from the dictionary. Abbreviated as Universal Worthy chapter, or the encouragements chapter, the 28th and last chapter of the Lotus Sutra. In the first part of the chapter, Bodhisattva Universal Worthy arrives from the land of the Buddha King above jeweled dignity and virtue in the East to pay homage to Shakyamuni Buddha and to hear him preach. He says to Shakyamuni, world honored one, when I was in the land of the Buddha King above jeweled dignity and virtue, from far away, I heard the Lotus Sutra being preached in this Sahe world. In company with this multitude of immeasurable, boundless, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of bodhisattvas, I have come to listen to and accept the sutra. I beg that the world honored one will preach it for us. He asks how one can acquire the Lotus Sutra after the Buddha's death. And in answer to this, Shakyamuni explains 4 conditions for doing so: to be protected and kept in mind by the Buddhas, to plant the roots of virtue, to enter the stage where one is sure of reaching enlightenment and to arouse the determination to save all living beings. Okay, now if you've done that, arouse the determination to save all living beings, then you perceive and understand yourself to be a Buddha as well. Okay, because that's what Buddhas do, right? Bodhisattva, and then it goes on to explain, Bodhisattva universal worthy then vows to protect the Lotus Sutra and all those who embrace it in the evil-ridden latter day of the law. Shakyamuni briefly explains the blessings obtained through the practice of the sutra and through the act of offering alms to and praising its practitioners. Alms praising its practitioners. He says, therefore, universal worthy, if you see a person who accepts and upholds this sutra, you should rise and greet him from afar, showing him the same respect you would a Buddha. Overjoyed to have heard the Lotus Sutra, all the assembly bow in obeisance to him and depart. In the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law, Kumarajiva's translation, which all of our from Chentai on, it's all based on Kumarajiva's translation of the Wonderful Law. Overjoyed to have heard the Lotus Sutra, all of the assembly bowed in obeisance to him and depart. In the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law, Kumarajiva's translation of the sutra, this is the final chapter, but in other versions, the Lotus Sutra of the Correct Law, translated by Dharmara Shah, and the supplemented Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law by Jung. These Indian names are over my head. Dharma Gupta. The entrustment chapter appears at the end of the 27 chapter sutra. Okay, so actually, the Daishonin is going to mention this, but President Ikeda is going to refer to it, and then I'll pull it up from the orally transmitted teachings where it's qualified by Nichiren. All right, so going to page 81 of volume 7 of Teachings for Victory. Stand up with courage. The spirit of Soka will usher in a triumphant revival of humanity. November, the season of chrysanthemums, is the month of the Soka Gakkai's founding. It is the month that the Soka Gakkai was formed as a result of the efforts of first President Tnesaburo Makaguchi and second President Josei Toda, who strove together united in spirit as mentor and disciple. Its birth, however, was not celebrated with much fanfare. Though leading thinkers in Japan at the time had high expectations for the Soka Kyoiku Gakkai, value-creating education society, as our organization was then known, it had no fine buildings or facilities. The English verb to found comes from the Latin, fundus, meaning foundation or base or ground. What was the foundation of the Soka Gakkai? What formed its base? It was neither wealth nor power, but rather, I believe, people with a noble vow and a passion to fulfill it. That should be us. Okay? That's really what it's talking about there. How, what formed its base? It was neither wealth nor power, but rather, I believe, people with a noble vow and a passion to fulfill it. Bodhisattvas of the earth. From the time Mr. Makaguchi first presented his philosophy of value-creating education to the world, he cherished the lofty wish of contributing to the happiness of humanity. With this wish as its base, the Soka Gakkai was founded through the efforts of fearless, self-reliant individuals committed to making that goal a reality. Fearless, self-reliant individuals committed to making that goal a reality. So what did that say? We are the ones that have to do this, This is going to go on and on and on and on. In 50 or 100 years, President Ikeda will be a legend. Okay, he's not going to be a current person. I'm not either. Okay, most of us around this table won't be around in 50 or 100 years either. We've already passed that point in our lives, okay? So the bottom line is that, but we are part of the base. We're the foundation. That's what we're creating, is the ability for people with a different karma to maybe have a little easier time and opportunity than we find ourselves in at this moment. But even though it's very difficult at this moment for us, the world has changed into a place of adversity and war again. And we're in a danger zone as it relates to conflict in a lot of places, okay, that weren't in that circumstance 10 years ago when this lecture was written, okay? So, continuing, at present, dedicated members from throughout Japan and the world, each one a bodhisattva of the earth, assemble day after day in high spirits at the hall of the Great Vow for Kosen Rufu in Shinanomachi, Tokyo. They are returning exuberantly to their respective areas, brimming with a renewed vow for Kosen Rufu. Our members everywhere are making a fresh start in courageously challenging their human revolution and striving for their own happiness and that of others. In tandem with this wonderful development, the new era of worldwide Kosen Rufu is growing dynamically in both momentum and brilliance. It is important for each person to stand up to fulfill their personal vow in the place where they are now. It is time for each person to resolutely launch a new struggle to realize the great vow for Kosen Rufu. So what did he just say there? I'll read it again. It is important for each person to stand up to fulfill their personal vow in the place where they are now. Okay, so have you taken a vow? I mean, when you're in front of the Gohonzon, do you understand that you've made a commitment to do Kosen Rufu or you wouldn't be sitting there?
Yeah.
Do you understand if you have not made that commitment, you can't possibly really be a bodhisattva of the earth. At some point in time, you're going to go away. Okay? Because only the bodhisattvas of the earth never go Taiten. Okay? Anybody that goes Taiten, frankly, technically, they can come back and validate the fact that they are bodhisattvas of the earth, but if they leave the realm of Buddhahood that is chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to the Gohonzon with a spirit to achieve widespread propagation, that's the thing. So again, it is important for each person, so if he's saying it's important,
Yeah.
to stand up to fulfill their personal vow in the place where they are now. It is time for each person to resolutely launch a new struggle to realize the great vow for Kosen Rufu. So you can't just be a happy talk, tag along. Even if that is part of the process and the only thing you got to do to fulfill your part of the equation, you've got to have in your heart that purpose. You can't just be moving along with the crowd for the sake of being part of the crowd. Do you understand what I say? Because otherwise you're not a Buddha. You're not taking on the responsibility that makes you one. All right? This is pretty kind of deep stuff. All right? It's not superficial. If you only have a superficial understanding of faith and practice, if you think that if you think that chanting Daimoku to the Gohonzon is a self-help deal, okay, or part of the law of attraction, or some of the other things that I've seen it described as in recent years, it is not. It is a time, Kuan Ganjo is a long time ago. What is Kuan Ganjo?
Time without beginning.
Time without beginning. So you can't get to the beginning. That's how long ago it is. It surpasses numberless major world system dust particle kalpas. It's a time that precedes the teaching that Shakyamuni qualifies he learned the Lotus Sutra in. Okay? So continuing on page 82. The founding spirit of the Soka Gakkai, the founding spirit, that may not be what it is in your particular region or location. Okay, the founding spirit in Japan, in Tokyo, with President Makaguchi and President Toda, that's the founding spirit. Two men that were willing to go to prison rather than follow along with the Minobu sect and put the Shinto talisman in the Butsudan's. They stood up against that. The priests of Nichiren Shoshu also complied with the government, put the Shinto talisman in the Butsudan's. Okay, when they actually remonstrated with the priests, with the high priests. They got turned in by the priesthood, and they ended up going to jail for it because they wouldn't renounce that position to the governmental authorities. So understand what he's saying when he's talking about the founding spirit of the Soka Gakkai. It is one that totally reflects this efforts of fearless, self-reliant individuals committed to making the goal of Kosen Rufu a reality. That is how it started. That's how it must continue.
Yes.
The founding spirit of the Soka Gakkai pulses vibrantly in the hearts of those who have the courage to do this. So he qualifies. Not everybody's going to be able to pull that off. They don't have the faith to do so. Okay? The founding spirit of the Soka Gakkai pulses vibrantly in the hearts of those who have the courage to stand up and be fearless and be committed to the goal of making Kosen Rufu not happy talk, but something that actually occurs in the whole world, not just in one area of the world. Their efforts will inspire one person after another to work for Kosen Rufu. Their efforts, the practitioners' efforts. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. Giving rise to a vast multitude of practitioners of the Lotus Sutra who directly follow the example of Nichiren Daishonin. Why? Because they taught them, those practitioners were able to teach them that same mind as Nichiren. Okay? Do you follow what I'm saying? All right. So in this chapter, let us study two of the most famous passages from the opening of the eyes and once again reflect on the great spirit of Nichiren Daishonin in standing up alone as the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law. Because that's ultimately what each one of us must do as well. All right? Let us also confirm the tremendous power of the human being as well as the pride of the SGI. Going to the Gosho itself. Again, this is from page 280 and 281 of volume 1 of the opening of the eyes. And of course, that's already been read. It took six stages of us doing it. I did it about a year ago. This I will state. Let the gods forsake me, let all persecutions assail me, still I will give my life for the sake of the law. Shariputra practiced the way of the Bodhisattva for 60 kalpas, but he abandoned the way because he could not endure the ordeal of the Brahmin who begged for his eye. Everybody knows that story, right? Okay? Those who received the seeds of Buddhahood in the remote past, and those, by the way, those of you that don't know that story, Shariputra said, I'll do anything. The Brahmin said, give me your eye. He plucked his eye out and the Brahmin squished it. What a bummer. And he abandoned faith because he didn't believe that should have been able to happen to him. But he abandoned the way because he could not endure the ordeal of the Brahmin who begged for his eye. Of those who received the seeds of Buddhahood in the remote past, and those who did so from the sons of the great Buddha, universal wisdom, excellence, many abandoned the seeds and suffered in hell for long periods of numberless major world system dust particle kalpas and major world system dust particle kalpas, respectively, because they followed evil companions. Do you understand where that point comes from? Where does it come from, George?
Evil companion.
Okay, because he provisionally says that he attained Buddhahood as the 16th son of great universal wisdom excellence. That's Sanzen Jintingo. That's major world system dust particle kalpas. And then he qualifies later, no, it's been numberless major world system dust particle kalpas, respectively, because they followed even evil companions. So he's qualifying that Shakyamuni had disciples that had gotten all the way to the Sahe world with him, in his teaching of the Lotus Sutra. And still they weren't able to hang. They were then reappeared in the former and the middle day of the law. That's the whole deal, okay? Those are Shakyamuni's disciples, all right? Whether tempted by good or threatened by evil, the Daishonin says, if one casts aside the Lotus Sutra, one destines oneself for hell. Here I will make a great vow, though I might be offered the rulership of Japan if I would only abandon the Lotus Sutra. Accept the teachings of the Meditation Sutra and look forward to rebirth in the Pure Land of Amida, though I might be told that my father and mother will have their heads cut off if I do not recite the Nimbutsu. whatever obstacles I might encounter, so long as persons of wisdom do not prove my teachings to be false, I will never yield. All other troubles are no more to me than dust before the wind. And I'm going to probably shed some tears. Is there a tissue I can get there? Because I don't have a choice over this. Thank you. He goes on to say, I will be. He makes this determination, this vow to the universe. I will be the pillar of Japan. I will be the eyes of Japan. I will be the great ship of Japan. This is my vow, and I will never forsake it. That should be our spirit. Okay? Now, we're not really going to have to be pillars of Japan or anything that deep, but this is about our vow to be bodhisattvas of the earth in this lifetime and to fulfill our missions for Kosen Rufu as we promised, because that's what the vow was. All right? Continuing on the page 82, last paragraph, second column. In one of his articles on the opening of the eyes, and that's why I needed the tissue, President Toda spoke of his powerful emotional reaction when reading this and other writings and coming into contact with the Daishonen's unflinching and impassioned spirit for Kosen Rufu. That's exactly how I felt. This is one of those little sections that we used to read before we had whole Goshos to read. That in the U.S., this was translated. This was something that we had to memorize. Both of these famous sections that we're going to go through today are things that we had to memorize when I was a kid. All right? He says, in one of his articles on the opening of the eyes, President Toda spoke of his emotional reaction when reading this and other writings and coming into contact with the Daishonen's unflinching and impassioned spirit for Kosen Rufu. His blazing spirit strikes my heart with the intensity of the noonday summer sun. My chest feels as if it is filled with a giant ball of molten iron. Sometimes I feel like a scalding spring is gushing forth from inside me, or as if a great earthquake, a great earth-shaking waterfall is crashing over me. And for me, I just cry. He says, I have also dedicated myself to the great struggle for Kosen Rufu. President Ikeda continues with his lecture. I have also dedicated myself to the great struggle for Kosen Rufu with the determination to internalize and put into action the Daishonin spirit with my entire being, just as my mentor taught. Now, what is that talking about? I'll read it again. I have also declared myself to the great struggle for Kosen Rufu with the determination to internalize and put into action the Daishonin spirit with my entire being, just as Josei Toda taught me to. Okay? For me, it was Tony Matsuoka. The exact same deal. I had the exact same experience, but it was with someone else. What's he talking about?
The courage to stand up.
The importance of being of the same mind as Nichiren. That's what he's qualifying. Whenever I read this passage of Nichiren Daishonin, I sense his towering life state, his spirit soaring to a lofty height and gazing down calmly on the world racked with strife and petty jealousies. The Daishonin is saying he doesn't care if the gods abandon him. It's not about how much benefit he got. He is ready to face any persecution. He is prepared to give his life without fear, without doubt, in order to propagate the Lotus Sutra. With the words, still I will give my life, he serenely affirms that he is prepared to uphold the correct teaching as long as he lives. That's being of the same mind as Nichiren. I will stand up alone here and now. I can hear this lion-hearted cry of the Daishonin as he stands invincible and unassailable as a massive rock amid a storm of persecution. In this work, the Daishonin urges people to open their eyes to the truth that the votary of the Lotus Sutra, In this work, the Daishonin urges people to open their eyes to the truth that the votary of the Lotus Sutra who propagates the correct teaching in the defiled latter day of the law, never hesitating in the face of persecution by the three powerful enemies, is the Lord of teachings who seeks to guide all living beings to enlightenment, and that person is none other than himself. The opening of the eyes is one of the Daishonin's major writings in which he reveals the object of devotion in terms of the person. And again, he is the Lord of teachings, but what does he go further to say? This was written on Sado Island, okay, the opening of the eyes. What does he say in the orally transmitted teachings about Lord of teachings? I read it to you last week before I let you leave. Not everybody else heard this. This was after the meeting ended. He goes from page 126 of chapter, it's from the lifespan chapter is point 3. He says, now Nichiren and his followers, those who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, are the original lords of teaching of the lifespan chapter. Okay? So that Daishonin is basically saying there is no separation between me and you, disciples. No matter what time in life and the ages that occur in the future of the 10,000 years and beyond of the latter day, we are all connected. None of you are less than me, and I'm not greater than any of you. Okay, so in that statement, he promised us the same empowerment as his own life if we have the same correct faith as he demonstrated and articulated in his teaching. So, continuing on page 83, second column, continuing, as I consider, I'll start at the top of the second column. The opening of the eyes is one of the Daishonin's major writings in which he reveals the object of devotion in terms of the person. The object of devotion in terms of the person is who? Yeah, but by virtue of what mechanism? The Gohonzon is the very life of the original teacher. When you manifest that same life state by fusing with it, by chanting the Daimoku that I'm talking, this doesn't come from jokey, happy face stuff. This is, again, very serious. All right? That's how it becomes the object of devotion in terms of the person. That's when it becomes you. Because there is no separation between you and the Gohonzon. Okay? The Gohonzon exists within you, right? As I consider its profound significance, I am again struck with awe. This is President Ikeda continuing. I am again struck with awe at the tremendous power, wisdom, and potential that resides in a single individual, and am filled with a deep appreciation of the dignity and nobility of the human being. So when you look at your leaders, anybody that's out there, or your mentors, they are just like you. They are human beings. They are not greater than you. If you perceive them to be greater than you, you will never become equal to them. Okay? So you have to understand this is a very important part, because most of us are taught in major religions that there's a God or something that we have been created by and that is better and greater than us, or priests or ministers or people of religion that are more pure and greater than us. The purity is from the spirit of faith. It's not so much about individual activities. Okay? That's why Ashoka could be a murderous king and become a Buddha. All right? So, how tenaciously a human being can fight for what is right. How supremely noble and strong a person can be. How invincible, inviolable, and magnificent is the human spirit. Continuing on page 83, on the middle of the second column, a teaching that fosters great people. Because what happens in the process of us finding Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and practicing it? A teaching that fosters great people.
Because we have trouble.
We go from being Buddhas in theory to being Buddhas in actuality, okay? We become thus come ones. We become great people. A teaching that fosters. Now, what's fosters mean? helps parent almost, you know, helps parent, teaches us how, leads us along from youth on into old age, to become great people, to become Buddhas in our present form, to leave a legacy in our lives that extends to the teaching of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo exactly as the Daishonin had. All right? In lifespan, the Lotus Sutra 16th chapter, Shakyamuni declares his attainment of enlightenment in the remote past, numberless major world system dust particle kalpas. Therefore, thereby casting off the transient and revealing the true. What is the message of the depths of this chapter? It is that all living beings possess the eternal life of the Buddha. That's why we're all capable of having the same mind as Nichiren. It calls on all people to awaken to this great inner self, to open their eyes to this tremendous potential. Because if you don't understand that you possess it, you'll never give yourself credit to be able to achieve it. And you'll always settle for being a support person. You'll never be the Buddha. You'll just stay a bodhisattva. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so it could be said that though, and this is President Ikeda telling you this, it isn't my opinion. All right? It could be said that through his own enormous struggle to propagate the law amid persecution, the Daishonin demonstrated for us the immense innate power of one person. It's basically saying, through his own struggle, through the Tatsunokuchi persecution, and making it through Izu and Sado, okay? We can do those same kinds of things ourselves. We are not limited because we're lesser individuals. The only thing limiting us is our faith and the depth of it, because it's the power of faith that allowed Nichiren to pull that stuff off, and we can do the same thing. That's what President Ikeda is saying here. It could be said that through his own enormous struggle to propagate the law amid persecution, the Daishonin demonstrated for us the immense innate power of one person. Human beings can never become more than human beings. Human beings can never become more than human beings. They don't become gods. Don't make them one. All right? We don't need to become a transcendental being apart from human like gods. We are all ordinary mortals. What matters is whether we achieve true greatness as human beings. That's called doing human revolution and achieving Buddhahood in your present form. This is the essential viewpoint of the humanistic teaching of Nichiren Buddhism that we uphold. When prejudiced journalists asked Mr. Toda if he regarded himself as a living Buddha or a god, he laughed uproariously and said, "I'm a proud common mortal." The American Renaissance philosopher Henry David Thoreau once declared, "Oh, for a man who is a man and has a bone in his back which you cannot pass your hand through." Buddhism, that means you're pretty much of a badass. Buddhism enables one person and then another to confidently demonstrate their true innate power as genuine human beings. It teaches the way to create a victorious network of such individuals who can live and succeed in life with dignity and conviction, with backbone, as Thoreau said, amid the real challenges of society. First column, page 84, bottom. Soka mentors and disciples put the Lotus Sutra into practice. The mentors and disciple, and he says mentors in plural. So he's not talking about, I'm the mentor. He's talking about each of you should also be mentors. You should have already practiced enough that you have the ability to teach people something that they wouldn't otherwise be able to grasp. All right? That's a mentor. The mentors and disciples of Soka are none other than the votaries, the genuine practitioners of the Lotus Sutra. That's what Daishonin just said that I read to you from chapter 16 of the orally transmitted teachings. Engaged in the Daishonin's great struggle of selfless dedication to propagating the law in the present day, being of the same mind, being willing to go through the same kinds of things if necessary, letting nothing stop us from achieving our mission. In other words, in this Sahe world where we must endure many sufferings, Let me say it again. In other words, in this Sahe world where we must endure many sufferings. I know it's a bitch, George. I feel the same way. Okay? So did the Daishonin. If you read enough of his Gosho, you can read where he's like, man, when is this shit going to stop? Okay? We don't ever ask that question. We just go on and defeat it. That's what makes us badasses. Okay? In other words, in this Sahe world, we must endure many sufferings amid our own struggles in life and efforts to share the mystic law with others in the real world. We are tirelessly carrying out the sacred work of value creation. That is, practicing the Lotus Sutra, chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo to the Gohonzon. In this year, 2014, shows you how old this is, marks the 70th anniversary of Mr. Makaguchi's death in prison for his beliefs, fighting valiantly against the oppression of Japan's wartime militarist authorities. He died on November 18th, 1944. Coincidentally, the same day of the month that in 1930 our organization had been born. A month before his death, Mr. Makaguchi wrote from prison, oh, this is all, these guys, wow. When I reflect on how I was able to produce, excuse me for a moment. When I reflect on how I was able to produce my theory of value, a theory that scholars for the past 100 years had sought in vain, and moreover to connect it to the faith in the Lotus Sutra, and enable several thousand people to realize actual proof. That's how small the group was before President Toda came out and went crazy with this campaign, with President Ikeda by his side all the way. Enable several thousand people to realize actual proof. I am surprised in spite of myself. Therefore, it is only natural that the 3 obstacles and 4 devils should have assailed me. It is just as the sutra states, because nobody starts out thinking that they can do this kind of stuff until they actually muster the courage to go through the gauntlet of opposition and come out the other side based on faith with a victory. You don't think of yourself going in, you're not all cocky. You're going to have some trepidation. It's not easy. It's not something that does not evoke concern. All right? It's okay to have those feelings. President Makaguchi did himself. I just read to you that. Calmly accepting his persecution by the militarist authorities as being just as the sutra states, he wrote proudly of his commitment to practicing the Lotus Sutra and of the actual proof he had achieved. This year is also the centennial of the outbreak of World War I in 1914, as well as the 75th anniversary of the start of World War II in 1939. Pardon me. I'm going to be sniffling a lot for the rest of this hour. Mystically, the Soka Gakkai was born in the period between those 2 great wars. Mr. Toda was released from prison right before World War II ended, and he stood up alone amid the ruins of defeated Japan to embark on a struggle to relieve people of suffering. The persecution of the Soka Gakkai during the war destroyed the organization that Mr. Makaguchi had worked so hard to build. That's why it became the Soka Gakkai instead of the Soka Kyoiku Gakkai. Okay? Carrying on his mentor's vision, Mr. Toda rebuilt the Soka Gakkai, determined to make it into a strong organization of the people that could never be destroyed by the oppression of ultranationalism. What's ultranationalism? Do you know? Okay, ultranationalism is sort of like what happened in Germany, or what's happened in many circumstances that allowed one type of person justify to themselves that they could kill and burn other people. Okay, so nationalism is the sense that your country's the best. Your people are the best. We are the top of the food chain. You know, we're the, no, okay? And so what he's saying is, so that come to a point where there's a society that can't be swept along by false sages, okay, that can burn them into doing things that they'll regret and that will destroy not only them but their countries as well. And history's filled, it's rife with examples of that. There are some of those circumstances are occurring right now. Okay, wait, hide and wait. See how things work. Right now, this is happening again. Carrying on his mentor's vision, Mr. Toda, middle of page 85, that first column, rebuilt the Soka Gakkai, determined to make it into a strong organization of the people that could never be destroyed by the oppression of ultranationalism. This can be described as the second founding of the Soka Gakkai. From war to peace, from nationalism to humanism. This is the great theme the Soka People's Movement pursues. Mr. Toda roared a lion's roar, expressing his wish to rid the world of misery. Herein lies the lofty purpose of practicing the Lotus Sutra in the modern age. Not just for yourself. You can't practice just to get benefits and do any of this. Okay? If you can't get past that point, you will eventually stop. Or you just won't get any benefit. Okay? A complete focus on the individual, page 85, bottom of the first column. I made Mr. Toda's spirit my own and vowed to act on his behalf. When I was inaugurated as the third Soka Gakkai president, on that sunny day of May 3rd, 1960, I declared to the members, though I am young, from this day I will take leadership as a representative of President Toda's disciples and advance with you another step toward the substantive realization of Kosen Rufu. Why did it take 3 years after President Toda died for them to decide to make President Ikeda the president? Do any of you know? It's because President Ikeda was leading the youth division. And the youth division is what revitalized this whole movement that Toda had been the mentor of. But he wasn't young, okay? It was the youthful spirit of like, Banzai! That led President Toda to build the massive number of people that ultimately they said, we really have to make. Everybody looks up to President Ikeda. These are all youth division or the predominant members of Soka. Okay? I was asserting that I too was standing up and would go on fighting all my life among the people as Mr. Toda's disciple, together with the youth, the people that he was really leading, to create a bright and hopeful future. The passage from the opening of the eyes rang in my heart. This I will state, let the gods forsake me, let all persecutions assail me, still I will give my life for the sake of the law. And frankly, Daisaku Ikeda has done exactly that. Were it not for his courage, we would still be under the yoke of the priesthood of Nichiren Shoshu. We would still believe that Buddhahood is something that we get to in our next life, that we can only qualify for in this lifetime, or that only happens at the end of our life, at our moment of death, or some stuff like that. Or that the priests are at a higher level than us, or that we only really receive benefit because of their prayers to the Daigo Honzon. I could go on and on and on about Nichiren Shoshu. I won't right now. I will another time. I promise to achieve the substantive realization of Kosen Rufu. What does that mean? I will promise to achieve in reality. I'll go make it go around the world. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo was only going on in Japan at that time. It's not like nobody anywhere else in the world but Japan knew about it, but it was not being propagated. There were no other Nichiren schools that were propagating it. Okay? Nichiren Shu doesn't propagate the Buddhism of sowing. They propagate the Buddhism of harvest. Nichiren Shu is the only one, the Minobu school, was the only one that had gone outside of Japan. Nichiren Shoshu, at that time, had just become larger than it had ever been. Nichiren Shoshu was the smallest school of the 5 major schools at the time that President Toda and President Makaguchi started the Soka Gakkai and the preceding organization. So he's saying, I promised when I was inaugurated to achieve the substantive realization of Kosen Rufu. This meant that with the 700th anniversary of the Daishonin's Treatise of Demonstration on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land as a starting point, I would go out among the people of the world and engage in the struggle to establish the humanism of Buddhism in contemporary society and in the life of each individual. And so what was the first thing that he did then as president? What happened was, again, the United States had occupied by this point in time Japan for a number of years. All right? Japan had been defeated. It was basically under the guidance and you'll do it this way. The emperor is no longer your guy. Okay? Got to give that up. Democracy occurred. And what happened is those many American service members that were stationed in Japan met these beautiful Japanese girls that they married, and then they went back home. Okay? So President Ikeda started going, that was the beginning of this Kosen Rufu, really. It was really all about Japanese women who married foreign national men, and through their wisdom convinced their husbands to begin practicing this Buddhism. And that's who President Ikeda was able to go visit. It was mostly Japanese people that had moved to a different country, and they usually had moved to that different country because they had remarried or they had married servicemen. That's why a lot of the leaders of SGI USA were ex-military. Okay, so they had no problem with strictness. They understood strictness. I did not understand strictness. When I first came in, you know, it was still a time when we didn't have chairs in the community centers yet. We had tatami mats. I mean, what the hell is this? And how can you guys do this? All right? And they insisted, no, you must kneel. Okay? That didn't end up staying. Things resolved themselves as time went on. It didn't become such a brutal reality of strictness. It became more and more liberal. And a lot of people, especially Nichiren Shoshu, thought that was becoming too liberal. You're getting away from the teaching. Well, I have not read a Gosho on kneeling on tatami mats. I have not read a Gosho on a lot of things that people that I started practicing with were teaching as fundamentals. These are things that I want to talk about next week. Okay? So, the focus on people, on human beings awakening their own inner potential, spreading this Buddhism of becoming a Buddha in your present form to all human beings throughout the world, not Japanese nationals. 40 years ago in 1974, I also traveled for the first time to China and the Soviet Union, then the two greatest nations of the communist world. There was a thick wall of antagonism separating East and West in those days of the Cold War, and relations between China and the Soviet Union were also extremely tense. Don't forget, at one point, you know, they were enemies. Right. The runaway nuclear arms race was threatening the very survival of humanity and people's right to live in peace. Before going to the Soviet Union, I was roundly criticized for many quarters in Japanese society. I was asked why a religious leader would want to visit a nation that rejected or even banned religion. To this I replied, because there are people there. At the culmination of my visit to Moscow, in a meeting with Premier Alexei Kosygin at the Kremlin, he asked me, what is your basic ideology? Without hesitation, I answered, I believe in peace, culture, and education, the underlying basis of which is humanism. I wanted to set in motion a new current of history centering on humanism. Premier Kosygin nodded thoughtfully and replied, that is an ideal we should also strive for. I vividly remember Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev. Again, this is all before Putin. I mean, that has all changed with the regime change. All right? I vividly remember Soviet President, because Putin, frankly, uses the Orthodox Christian denomination. Orthodox, they split from Catholicism. Yeah, Orthodox, the ones that have two bars on their cross. He uses that for his own power.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the head of that belief set, okay, is totally tight with the Kremlin. And everything that they do that kills people, no problem. We're Russians. I vividly remember Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, whom I met years later in 1990, and I'm not dissing my Russian friends, by the way. I'm saying that. That's what happens when you have ultranationalism. People can justify not being human anymore. I vividly remember Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, when I met him years later in 1990, expressed appreciation for the values and ideals of humanism, adding that he was attempting to gradually bring the spiritual aspects of ethics and morals into government. Our times are moving unmistakably at the deepest level toward a focus on human beings and humanism. And I think you could have possibly said that easily in 2014, but I'm not so sure that we can so assuredly say that that's the case today. That's what I want to talk about next week. Okay? This is the reality. This is an old Gosho lecture. The world is not changing in the right direction, seemingly, at this moment. It's up to us to correct that. Put it back on the right spin. Our times are moving unmistakably at the deepest level towards a focus on human beings and humanism. In November, and also the Soka Gakkai organization in the United States is much smaller than it was. The Soka Gakkai organization in the UK is much smaller than it was. If you talk about in Japan, there are fewer old die-hard members than the youth division that have taken over. I just had a big conversation about this a few weeks ago. The reality of Kosen Rufu occurring is at risk right now if we, the Bodhisattvas of the earth, don't stand up in exact accord with what he is saying right here. That's why before I opened my mouth, I thought, I'll just read this because this is going to say everything I'm going to say. It's just going to say it in a different way. Okay? In November 1975, renewing my vow to work for the abolition of nuclear weapons, I laid flowers at the cenotaph for the atomic bomb victims in Hiroshima, where the first atomic bomb was dropped at the end of World War II. Pardon me. On August 6, 1945, bottom of the first paragraph, 86, or first column, page 86. At a Soka Gakkai headquarters general meeting held during my visit there, I said the social role and mission of the Soka Gakkai is to engage in a spiritual struggle arising from the innermost depths of our beings against such external forces as violence and political and economic oppression that violate the dignity of human life. No matter how harsh the circumstances prevailing in the world, there is no need for us to give in to feelings of despair or powerlessness. We should actually be inspired to take action when we see this. The harsh circumstances prevailing in the world should inspire us to take action. All right? There is no need for us to give in to feelings of despair or powerlessness. The Lotus Sutra teaches that we possess the inherent power of life to act with hope and open a way forward with courage. But we must all become correct teachers to be able to do that most efficiently. That means you have to really understand the Gosho, frankly. The aim of Nichiren Buddhism is to activate the power that resides within us to overcome adversity. Continuing, second column, page 86, middle. The three virtues of sovereign teacher and parent. In the opening of the eyes, the Daishonin mentions two hypothetical situations, major obstacles that authorities might devise to attempt to sway him. The first is offering him the rulership of Japan, and the second is threatening to behead his mother and father. I just read that, right? He says, indicating that he would never succumb to such obstacles, the former a temptation of worldly pleasure and power, the second a threat of violent persecution, the Daishonin declares his unwavering vow, even in the face of such circumstances and threats, to live out his life as the votary of the Lotus Sutra, committed to guiding all people of the latter day to enlightenment. As a Buddha. That's what Buddhas do. guiding all people of the latter day to enlightenment. In other words, he states, I will be the pillar of Japan. I will be the eyes of Japan. I will be the great ship of Japan. This is my vow, and I will never forsake it. If we take his vow, if we're of the same mind as Nichiren, we have that same determination in whatever small way that we're capable of. Nichikan Shonin, a great restorer of Nichiren Buddhism, whose Gohonzon is the Gohonzon that his interpretation of the Gohonzon is what we chant to, interprets these three vows as corresponding to the three virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent. The pillar is the virtue of the sovereign. The eyes are the virtue of the teacher. And the great ship is the virtue of the parent. A pillar, in page 87, first column. A pillar, second paragraph. A pillar, whether visible or not, and this is the whole key. You don't have to be the guy talking at the front of the room. You can be the people that understand what he's saying and that can explain it to the people that didn't quite grasp it after the meeting. Okay? There's no separation between the guy talking in the front of the room and the people that assist in making that clarity. Do you understand? So, a pillar, whether visible or not, steadily supports the home and protects its residents. Eyes represent the power to see the truth of things, thus helping people avoid mistaking their way and providing the power to lead them in a correct direction. That's the ability to give correct guidance and toward correct faith, not in providing a solution like I know best and I'll tell you what you should do, but helping them understand how they can bring forth the wisdom to perceive that themselves as the Buddhas that they are. Eyes represent the power to see the truth of things, that all people are Buddhas, thus helping people avoid mistaking their way, thinking that they're not, and providing the power to lead them in the correct direction, to discover that power of Buddhahood in their life. A great ship carries many people safely over rough waters to their destination. That's being a leader. It provides the kind of reassurance and comfort that parents give to their children. From another perspective, the three virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent are also the three requirements for leadership. The virtue of sovereign is the sense of responsibility to protect the people. The virtue of the teacher is the wisdom to lead the people. The virtue of the parent is the compassion to nurture the people. Protecting the people corresponds to peace. Leading the people corresponds to education. And nurturing the people corresponds to culture. By extension, practicing the Lotus Sutra is creating peace, bringing light through the power of education, and cultivating the rich earth of culture. It is building an age in which people who are actively engaged in value creation, described in the Lotus Sutra as human flowers, will blossom and thrive. And here it is. If you go to page 142, in this way, Kesheapa, the law preached by the Buddha is comparable to a great cloud that with the single flavored rain moistens human flowers so that each is able to bear fruit. Kesheapa, you should understand that through the various causes and conditions, various kinds of similes and parable, I open up and reveal the Buddha way. This is the expedient means I employ, and the same is true of the other Buddhas. Now for you and others, I preach the utmost truth. None in the multitude of voice hearers has entered the stage of extinction. What you are practicing is the Bodhisattva way, and as you gradually advance in practice and learning, you are certain to attain Buddhahood. Where am I? Oh, okay. Well, it is building an age in which people who are actively engaged in value creation, which would be us as members of Soka, described in the Lotus Sutra as human flowers, will blossom and thrive and reveal our Buddhahood. Votaries of the Lotus Sutra, which we are practitioners of humanism who bring to blossom the infinite potential of their own and others. noble lives, the reality that they're Buddhists, revitalize individuals and society, pacify the land through the propagation of the law, and thereby creating a world where all people can live in peace and happiness. Kosen Rufu. The efforts of the SGI to expand its movement for peace, culture, and education based on Buddhist humanism are in perfect accord with the Daishonin's great vow to enable all people to attain enlightenment. In the record of the orally transmitted teachings, the Daishonin states, it is due to the authority and supernatural power of the Bodhisattva Universal Worthy, or Universal Wisdom, that this Lotus Sutra is propagated throughout Jampadvipa, the entire world. Page 190. I should have something here marking it. Pardon me. Yeah. Okay, it says point 2 from the encouragements chapter from the OTT. Point 2 on the passage, when the Lotus Sutra is propagated throughout Jampadvipa, there are those who accept and uphold it. They should think to themselves, this is all due to the authority and supernatural power of Universal Worthy. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says it is due to the authority and supernatural power of Universal Worthy that this Lotus Sutra is propagated throughout Jampadvipa. Therefore, the widespread propagation of this sutra must be under the care and protection of Bodhisattva Universal Worthy. And President Ikeda is expressing the reality that Universal Worthy is really the propagation of universal wisdom, the wisdom of the Buddha that exists within all people, regardless of who they are. All that has to happen is it has to be brought forth. We of the SGI are bringing the spirit of the Lotus Sutra to permeate the entire world through the power of universal wisdom. What's universal wisdom?
The wisdom of the Buddha?
Buddha nature, yes. Buddhahood, the wisdom that's innately within all human beings, as exemplified by Bodhisattva Universal Worthy. Our place of practice is here and now. Page 87, second column at the bottom. Where is the place that the votaries of the Lotus Sutra freely and actively carry out their practice? It is here in the Sahe world, this real world. As votaries of the Lotus Sutra, we do not withdraw from the real world, nor do we scorn, mock, or abhor society, rife as it is with contradictions. We remain among the people, carrying on our struggle in the very midst of this real world. Right where we are, here and now, is the place we carry out our practice to become better human beings. Page 88, first column. I am reminded of the words of the Japanese human rights activist Shozo Tanaka, who was born in 1841 and died in 1913. So this guy's over 100 years ago. What use to the world is retiring to the mountains and becoming a sage? I believe that you can become a sage in the turmoil of society, or standing in the midst of conflict and torturous struggles. Being sharpened, polished, honed amid these same self-trials and challenges, you will naturally benefit society. That, he declared, was his personal belief. Born in Shimotsuke province, Tanaka played a pivotal role in the Ashio copper mine incident, the first major industrial pollution scandal in modern Japan. Through his involvement, he showed himself to be a true champion of the people, empathizing with the terrible suffering of the farmers affected by pollution and fighting for their interests. Tanaka's belief resonates deeply with our commitment to advance alongside ordinary people in the turmoil of society and standing in the midst of conflict and tortuous struggles. As we together engage in society's difficult challenges, we will always remain on the side of the people, sharing their joys and sorrows, overcoming every obstacle and hardship, fighting to the end for their happiness and victory. That is the fundamental spirit of our SGI movement. Such unfaltering and indomitable action is the real nature of the votary or genuine practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. Such unfaltering and indomitable action is the real nature of the votary or genuine practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. Okay, so I'm going to say that again because I know that got by everybody. We, at the bottom of page 88, first column, we will always remain on the side of the people, not on the side of the leadership, on the side of the people, sharing their joys and sorrows, being with them, understanding their lives, being part of that, overcoming every obstacle and hardship, giving them the support necessary to win, fighting to the end for their happiness and victory, having their advance in practice and faith be something that is very important to us and that we feel is a fundamental responsibility ourselves to guide and to assist in. That is the fundamental spirit of our SGI movement. Such unfaltering, indomitable action is the real nature of the votary or genuine practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. That's saying not just because you're a Soka Gakkai member. That's saying anybody with that spirit is a genuine votary of the Lotus Sutra and a correct practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. All right? Continuing on page 88, middle of the second column. The noble call for a shared struggle of mentor and disciple. This goes back to the Gosho, the opening of the eyes. Famous section, all from page 283 of the opening of WND1. Although I and my disciples may encounter various difficulties, if we do not harbor doubts in our hearts, we will as a matter of course attain Buddhahood. Do not have doubts simply because heaven does not lend you protection. So when we struggle, we shouldn't be bummed. It says, do not have doubts simply because heaven does not lend you protection. Do not be discouraged because you do not enjoy an easy and secure existence in this life. This is what I have taught my disciples morning and evening, and yet they begin to harbor doubts and abandon their faith. Foolish men, because there's nothing that you experience that you didn't volunteer for. Okay, whether you have the wisdom to remember that or not, the Buddha nature that you have goes back to where? You're a disciple of Nichiren. Goes back to where? Kuan Ganjo, baby. Okay, so we didn't attain this in numberless major world systems, dust particle kalpas, or major world system dust particle kalpas. We're the original disciples. We created the karma to be able to accomplish this. If you can't remember that promise, then you're a foolish man. You're a foolish person. Let me start over and read the whole thing through again. Although I and my disciples may encounter various difficulties, which you absolutely are going to, if we do not harbor doubts in our hearts, we will, as a matter of course, just by never stopping, just by continuing, we will attain Buddhahood. Do not have doubts simply because heaven does not lend you protection. Do not be discouraged because you do not enjoy an easy and secure existence in this life. This is what I have taught my disciples morning and evening, and yet they begin to harbor doubts and abandon their faith. Foolish men are likely to forget the promises they have made when the crucial moment comes. That's saying, what's the crucial moment? When you're facing the adversity and it seems as though your prayers are not being heard and that you're not getting the benefit that you're due. That's when doubts arise. It's easy to believe in the sutra when everything you chant for happens easily. It takes courage and it takes strength of faith to persevere through that. That's why in the beginning of our practice, the universe doesn't expect us to all be mentors. We get benefits much more easily when we start practicing than we do as we continue year after year. After 50 some odd years, yeah, you better be a teacher by then, or you weren't taking seriously the whole teaching that you were studying or practicing with for that 50 years that got you there. All right, so we all have to become teachers, is my point, for Kosen Rufu to occur. We all have to understand the Gosho. We can't just have an understanding of President Ikeda's rap, because like I said, he's from Japan. He's from a different time period. He's from World War II kind of person, man. That's why we haven't seen him for a number of years. He's very old. He's not contemporary at this point. His teaching is, the wisdom of what he's saying is infinite. It's exactly the same spirit as the Daishonin. Yes. But the conveyors of this truth at this moment must be us. Okay? Sternly yet warmly, the Daishonin also called on his disciples to demonstrate the same unwavering commitment he did. That's all that's his saying. In the above passage, we can detect both his deep trust and strict compassion toward his disciples. His words resonate with the message that he had risked his life as the votary of the Lotus Sutra to overcome great persecutions in his effort to propagate the law. And that if his disciples, who are also votaries, continued to strive alongside him in his struggle, they could likewise never fail to overcome their hardships. Never fail to overcome their hardships. Never fail to overcome their hardships, but only if they're also votaries. Yeah. Mentor and disciple are one, not separate. That's why you should not look at the guy at the front of the room as somebody better than you, somebody special. All right? Mentor and disciple are one, not separate. When we look at the Daishonin's writings, we see that he referred to his disciples who persevered in their Buddhist practice with unwavering faith, both men and women, young and old, as votaries of the Lotus Sutra. And you can go through the OTT, and at every point of summation of every chapter, he qualifies now Nichiren and his disciples who act with the same mind. And so he qualifies us over and over and over again in the orally transmitted teachings as being just like him. When we look at the Daishonin's writings, we see that he referred to his disciples who persevered in their Buddhist practice with unwavering faith, both men and women, young and old, as votaries of the Lotus Sutra. For instance, praising Oto Gozen's mother, Sage Nichimyo, the Daishonin writes, "You are the foremost votary of the Lotus Sutra among the women of Japan." From WND 1, page 325. Referring to the son of Abutsubo and the lay nun Shinichi, he declares, "Takuro Moritsuna has followed in his father's footsteps and become a wholehearted votary of the Lotus Sutra." From page 1045 of volume 1. Writing to the lay nun Toki, the wife of Toki Jonin, the Daishonin described Shijo Kingo as not only an excellent physician, but a votary of the Lotus Sutra, from page 955 of volume 1. Commending the staunch faith of Ikegami Muenaka in the face of being disinherited by his father, and urging Muenaka's younger brother Muenaga not to abandon his faith. The Daishonin writes, "Muenaka will now become one of the Lotus Sutra's votaries," from page 637. Praising the lay nun Konichi, who lost her beloved son but remained steadfast in her Buddhist practice. The Daishonin says, "How much more will Buddhahood be assured for the present-day Honorable Konichi, who, out of her great affection for her son, became a practitioner or votary of the Lotus Sutra." From volume 2, page 964. The situation, second column, page 89. The situation in each of these the situation of each of these people was different, as was the length of their practice and the reasons they took faith in the Daishonin's teachings, just as it was for all of us. But to the Daishonin, they were all disciples who shared profound karmic ties with him, votaries of the Lotus Sutra, just as all of us do. I guarantee you, we have known each other for many lifetimes. Each propagating the mystic law to the best of their abilities, and that's all that's required, to the best of your ability. You don't have to become a sage. Returning to the above passage, because if you do it correctly, you are a sage. You're a badass. Returning to the above passage in the opening of the eyes, which contains the phrase, "I and my disciples," that Daishonin here infers that both he and his disciples who share his struggle are equally votaries of the Lotus Sutra. By the same principle, I am absolutely certain that the Daishonin would highly praise as votaries of the Lotus Sutra all who dedicate themselves to the great vow of propagating the mystic law, whoever they may be and in whatever age they may live. Bottom of page 89, second column. We're almost there. when the Soka Gakkai transferred its headquarters to the Shinanomachi area of Tokyo in 1953, we moved into an age of dramatic progress in Kosen-rufu. Mr. Toda often said to members, to meet and encounter an auspicious time, to be in rhythm with that time, makes having been born worthwhile. Continue on page 90, first column top. At that crucial juncture, he declared himself a great champion committed to fighting for Kosen-rufu and repeatedly urged all Soka Gakkai members to become champions themselves. A champion of Kosen-rufu is another name for a votary of the Lotus Sutra. I, as the third president, and all my noble fellow members who have worked alongside me in our shared struggle are champions of Kosen-rufu who have assembled in the Garden of Soka, called forth by a wondrous destiny and mission at this crucial moment. The Garden of Soka, lots of different things in that garden, referring to a passage describing the emergence of the bodhisattvas of the earth. The Daishonin says emerging indicates that at the time of Kosen-rufu, living beings throughout Jampadvipa, the entire world, will become votaries of the Lotus Sutra. That's from the Gosho Zinshu. That hasn't been translated. Today, in accord with these words, bodhisattvas of the earth, votaries of the Lotus Sutra, are emerging in a steady stream all around the globe with noble missions and are striving energetically to fulfill their vow to realize peace and happiness for all humanity. Now, many centuries after Nichiren Daishonin, we are carrying on his work in the present day. He is directly calling to us, his followers of the present age, my disciples, form your ranks and follow me. Join me in striving for Kosen-rufu eternally. What does that mean? Attain Buddhahood in your present form, because you're going to continue to attain Buddhahood in your present form in every future lifetime. And if you're a Buddha in your present form in each lifetime, you're a teacher of the people. You're a champion of the law. You're a teacher of the law. That's what he said. Now, many centuries after Nichiren Daishonin, we are carrying on his work in the present day. He is directly calling on us, his followers of the present age. Don't think this is a one-time deal. It isn't. We've been through this before many times. He is directly calling to us, his followers of the present age, my disciples, form your ranks and follow me. Join me in striving for Kosen-rufu eternally. The Soka Gakkai emerged based on the vow to advance forever along this great path of mentor and disciple. Our members are the pillars, employing all their wisdom to encourage others and support and safeguard society, whether their efforts are noticed or not. They are the eyes illuminating the path of hope and revealing the path of justice. They are the great ships warmly embracing people and nurturing them so they can freely bring forth their potential. Everything begins with standing up and taking personal initiative. Guys, that's what we all did. Didn't we? Nobody told us we could do this. We didn't get permission. We decided this is what we wanted to do, and we were going to hang together while we did it. There are people that used to be at the table that aren't. There's a reason why we're all still here. And those that aren't are missing for very good reasons. That means that they don't belong at the table. It means that they're just not here today. But the point is that those of us that are sitting here right now, you can be assured. Okay? Everything begins with standing up and taking personal initiative. It starts with our human revolution. Okay? You can't be one of the same mind as Nichiren if you really don't understand the Gosho. We must awaken to the innate power that resides within us and create a new age that celebrates true human victory. The Daishonin's ideal of establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land can be realized only by expanding the network of ordinary people who share this same purpose, comrades working together in their communities and countries with a shared vow. This is the steadfast and surest way to build a peaceful society. So I'll read that again because he's talking about us. That's exactly what we're doing and what we're striving for. Yes. And he doesn't qualify this as just being Soka members.
More.
Okay, this is the Daishonen's ideal of establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land can be realized only by expanding the network of ordinary people who share this same purpose. That's being of the same mind as Nichiren. That's not restrictive to being anything other than a votary of the Lotus Sutra. Comrades working together in their communities and countries with a shared vow. That is the steadiest and surest way to build a peaceful society. Aiming for the eternal victory of humanity. We're almost done. Page 90, second column, last paragraph. The Indian independence leader Mahatma Gandhi, while organizing a nonviolent movement to fight for racial equality in South Africa, called out to the people striving alongside him, I can boldly declare and with certainty that so long as there is even a handful of men true to their pledge, there can only be one end to the struggle, and that is victory. A pledge or vow truly has immense power. Top of page 91, first column. What was the vision for the future cherished by the Soka Gakkai when it was founded under the leadership of our first two presidents and embarked with the great purpose of contributing to the happiness of humanity? It was the eternal victory of the human race. That's Kosen Rufu. The vowed and cherished wish of the SGI is the victory of humankind. Wherever we press onward, dedicated to the great vow for worldwide Kosen Rufu, a pan of humanity rings out. In the final year of his life, the renowned Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore extolled the magnificence of the human being. Now has come man supreme. The heavens thundered the song of victory. Man has come. The curtain has now brilliantly risen on the century of Soka, the century of humanity's victory. Let our jubilant cheers resound far and wide, celebrating the revitalization of humanity. Nothing can surpass the radiance of people who have awakened to their own noble mission, to their boundless potential. Let me say that again. Nothing can surpass the radiance of people who have awakened to their own noble mission, to their boundless potential. That means that they have realized that they are Buddhas exactly as they are. How marvelous is the inner power of human beings. What fine young people we have in our community. How brilliantly Soka women are shining. How fortunate we are to have such impressive comrades. Cheers for humanity. When we open our eyes, do we see great individuals emerging dynamically just as they are from among the people? Because that's correct vision. That's the eyes of the Buddha. We are building a world of peace in which magnificent human flowers can blossom freely in the garden of Soka. We are fellow bodhisattvas of the earth, sharing deep, wondrous karmic ties and a profound mission. And I added that garden of Soka because garden of Soka is not constrained by membership in the Soka Gakkai. Garden of Soka is votaries of the Lotus Sutra. We are fellow bodhisattvas of the earth, sharing deep, wondrous karmic ties and a profound mission, who have risen up with joy and courage at this never to be repeat. Who have risen up with joy and courage at this never to be repeated crucial moment in this new era of worldwide Kosen Rufu. Please continue striving together with me in the SGI to fulfill the vow you have made for Kosen Rufu and achieve victory in every sphere of your life in this existence. How long is this video?
1 hour 28 minutes.
28 minutes? I'm going to use 2 minutes. Okay, so the bottom line is next week I'll have another I'll have more to add to this and much of my personal history, because again, I think you'll find it interesting.
Next time.
Next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.